Good morning, everybody. So, I want to share out of the book of John this morning from chapter 7, and I'm going to read verses 14 through 24. So, this takes place during the Jewish festival of shelters. Just prior to this, his brothers were telling him, you know, to go to the festivals and perform his miracles and everything so that he can be seen and can become famous. Um, Part of that being is that they actually didn't believe that Jesus was the Messiah. So, but Jesus said, "No, it's not my time. I'm not going to go." And he told them, "You guys go ahead." But then after his brothers left, he did go to Jerusalem secretly, staying out of sight until about midway through the festival, he decides to go to the temple to start to teach. And this is where we pick up on verse 14. Then, midway through the festival, Jesus went up to the temple and began to teach. The people were surprised when they heard him. "How does he know so much when he hasn't been trained?" they asked. So Jesus told them, "My message is not my own. It comes from God who sent me. Anyone who wants to do the will of God will know whether my teaching is from God or is merely my own. Those who speak for themselves want glory only for themselves. But a person who seeks to honor the one who sent him speaks truth, not lies. Moses gave you the law, but none of you obeys it. In fact, you are trying to kill me." The crowd replied, "You're demon possessed. Who's trying to kill you?" Jesus replied, "I did one miracle on the Sabbath, and you were amazed. But you work on the Sabbath too when you obey Moses' law of circumcision. Actually, this tradition of circumcision began with the patriarchs long before the law of Moses. For if the correct time for circumcising your son falls on the Sabbath, you go ahead and do it so as not to break the law of Moses. So why should you be angry with me for healing a man on the Sabbath? Look beneath the surface so you can judge correctly." So when I read this, it gives me a picture of a warning of having a double standard. I guess is the best way I would like to express it. Um, because here he kind of points out several things. One, he flat out tells him nobody obeys the law of Moses. Firstly, because they're trying to kill him. So right there, they're violating the "thou shalt not murder" because they're trying to kill him, or "thou shalt not commit murder." And then he goes on to focus on the uh, Moses' law of circumcision. Well, he points to the crowd and the religious leaders that are there that, in fact, the practice of circumcision was being done well before God gave Moses his laws, his 10 Commandments, for the Israelites to follow. So now it kind of points out how the religious leaders are adding to God's words to justify what they were trying to do in killing Jesus. And then he questions them, using the law of circumcision, which was a practice before the law even came out, for one. So the Pharisees added to God's word, which is a sin in itself. And two, They only follow it when it conveniences them. Because he points out that if a child's circumcision should happen to fall on the Sabbath day, they're going to go ahead and do the circumcision so they don't break the law of Moses, so they don't break man's adaptation of God's law. So he questions, so how can you judge me for healing a man on the Sabbath? It's a double standard. To me, it's exposing the double standard that the religious leaders and the scribes had when it came to following God and following the law of Moses. And that's why he said, look beneath the surface so you can judge correctly. He's challenging them to to see the truth of what they're doing. They're not obeying God's law. They're obeying the laws how they see fit. They're changing God's law to the way they want it to serve them. Because everybody knows that God said on the Sabbath there's to be no work to be done whatsoever. It's a day of rest. And the priests and the Pharisees were being so legalistic to the law that they're willing to follow what they deem important over God's commandment of keeping the Sabbath free from work, making a day of rest, making a day for serving and glorifying and worshiping Him. So the Pharisees are already trying to take God's place in leading the people. Hence, that's how I get the double standard. They can do it, but nobody else can. So, and we got to be careful of having that same double standard. Picking and choosing what we decide to follow on what God says, and to be careful not to add to or take away from God's word, because God's word is truth and it's uncompromising. There's no gray area. It's black and white. So we can't pick and choose what we want to follow, and we can't justify what we do by whatever scriptures we want to try to use to justify our means of what we're doing. That's a double standard, and it's also blasphemous. If we catch ourselves doing that, we need to be very quick and very humble in asking for forgiveness and asking God what we need to do to prevent us from doing it again. So, anyways, I love you guys. You have a blessed day, and we'll see you tomorrow.